Okay, so it is 7:04, and we'll call this January regular meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission at 7:04. Is there any additions, modifications, or adjustments to the agenda? I would want to with our section reviewing the Middlebury College students, we did have, just a matter of formality in our agenda, a time frame, but I want to make sure that we afford all the presenters the amount of time that they need, and I am not overly concerned about adhering to the agenda times, if you will. We also have Herb Olson with us tonight. Herb is a representative of the Bristol, the legislative district of Bristol's in. Herb is, I'm not sure if this is required in that capacity, but Herb is a non-resident, is a resident of Starksboro. I just want to bring that up, and if there's any planning commission members that would object to him to join in on the conversation. Hearing none, Herb, you're certainly welcome to join in on the conversation as it goes on and you see fit. So I guess the next item is item 4. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, public comment. Do we have any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 4, which is a continuing business of the presentations from the Middlebury College students who are working on some different topics for us as we consider housing within Bristol past what we originally accomplished recently for the bylaw planning grant. So I guess AZ, do you want to coordinate that, or is just Professor Teets?
Yeah, we have
I'll let AZ take over.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have density group going up first. I'm gonna pull up your presentation here.
So I sent the PowerPoint version. Okay. So Professor Teets, we won't be able to use the animate feature that you suggested, I don't think, but
Okay.
Oh, there's an animate feature. Oh. Hmm. We're not going to get fancy with the presentation. My computer's on its last legs. I apologize.
You just need to start the presentation. You can either do it at the bottom or from the menu at the top. It's still showing all of them.
There we are.
No, it's still showing the same thing.
Mm. Mm.
If not, Ellie could always share screen.
Yeah, I think we're gonna go share screen. I don't want to push this computer past its limits.
Is that okay, Ellie? Are you going to be the one to share screen? Okay.
are you seeing it okay?
Yes, you just need to launch it.
Yes, it's loading now.
Ta-da.
So we
There you
are
go.
the group that is researching how we can increase density in Bristol without new construction. My name is Ellie, and then Alden and Madison are also here today, but Callie couldn't make it, unfortunately. And
So the first research question we've been looking into is what changes can we make to the Bristol zoning regulations to facilitate the development of additional residential units in already existing structures? And the second one we're looking into is what funding programs currently exist that are relevant to these projects, and how can we make the most out of these limited financial resources? Additionally, what non-financial barriers exist to these projects, and what resources can we provide to potential developers to assist them?
So looking over our research steps, we reviewed the Bristol zoning codes, looked at other towns like Bristol, such as Brandon, Heinsberg, Ripton, and Moncton, talked to local experts like AZ, and we have appointments with Jim Mendel and John Moyers to talk about their buildings. And then we reviewed state funding and federal housing programs. And then also, we're looking at an analysis of Bristol's ADU and the housing development over the past few years.
And so we've kind of organized our findings into those questions. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about zoning changes that we could potentially make. And the first one we've discussed as a group as being really important, I know has already been revised recently, but it's the matter of how many residential units are allowed per acre in certain zoning neighborhoods. And this is something that we talked about with Elise, from the executive director from Addison Housing Works, as being really limiting when trying to build densely. Just considering that, especially with a town such as Bristol, where there's a cutoff on one edge, it goes right up into the mountains. There's not a whole lot of extra space to work with. It's really important to be able to pack units in tightly in the downtown area. And then also thinking about, if we have an allowance to build more units, then we can focus really on building the kinds of units we need. So instead of building 4 single family homes on a single acre, we can do 8, 10 smaller units that can suit the declining household sizes that we're seeing in the data, and also developments for senior spaces. And Callie has been looking into some kind of comparative zoning regulations in other places. So I know that today she was looking at Montpelier, and then also the towns that Alden mentioned earlier. So hopefully the next time we meet, we'll have some comparisons to show you. But just for anyone who doesn't know, right now, even in high density residential areas, it's 4 units per acre. So that's why I was kind of referencing that as a starting point. And then we've also been thinking a lot about how multifamily really seems to be the way forward in terms of increasing density. And just a reminder that this is all under kind of the scope of developing existing structures. So this is not like new developments, which another group will talk about later, but it is still relevant. And one thing that we found is that there's a pretty lengthy review process for the development of multifamily units. And while that's really important, we've seen with ADUs that kind of free for all is not the way to go. And I would say that's even more true with larger projects. We're hoping that we can find ways to expedite the process, make it less time consuming and more affordable, specifically for projects that are affordable housing and benefit the community, just so that people who are undertaking these projects feel that they have the smallest barrier possible. Remembering especially that because these are renovations, rehabilitations, it's often townspeople who are undertaking the projects. It's not new developers coming in from outside. So really streamlining the process, we think, would be really helpful. And then something that we've just kind of started looking into is allowable use. What kind of structures are allowed where? So this jumps back again to multifamily, given that right now single family and duplex are kind of prioritized as the most acceptable housing types. And then also thinking about, this is something that we're still developing, but maybe considering mixed use as a good way to move forward and having fewer restrictions on that. As we were doing our walking tour, AZ pointed out this building that's functioning really well for the town. There's a great coffee shop, there are apartments above. And unfortunately, that kind of development isn't super possible just with where commercial and like retail spaces are allowed in town. So thinking about maybe that's a way to bring more interest in to residential development by making it some residential, some retail. We're going to move on to question 2 with Madison.
And we want to answer or look into what current funding programs exist, given that it may be important, given that there are certain residential members that are willing to take on a certain rehabilitation project or add new units, but have significant financial concerns about the process or lack the financial capital necessary to go about it. Specifically, we've been looking into the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, also known as VHIP. And per Addison Housing Works, this program has shifted to mostly prioritize rehab projects, which is especially relevant to the work we've been doing. Additionally, property owners under this program can receive up to $50,000 per unit to rehab unusable units or transform commercial spaces into residential. Specifically, property owners are eligible to receive up to $30,000 per unit for rehab between 0 to 2 bedroom units, as well as $50,000 per unit for rehab of 3+ bedroom units, as well as the creation of ADUs. But specifically, a part of our process is trying to learn more about how much do these rehab projects cost in total, just to get a better idea of how effective this VHIP funding really is. We also have been aware that certain projects may cost a significant amount of money, and the proportion of VHIP funding may be small compared to the total cost. So getting a better idea of that, as well as looking into the fact how units must be rented at market rates for a certain period, which I believe is between 5 to 10 years. And also looking to the eligible projects that qualify for VHIP funding, which includes current residential spaces not up to code. So applying funding towards completing repairs necessary for code compliance, for instance, maybe weatherization and accessibility improvements. But also improving commercial and other spaces as well, for instance, barns, to be converted to residential standards. Additionally, we've kind of looked into the Vermont Low Income Housing Tax Credit. Can we click one more? And we've been researching how this program supports the development of affordable subsidized housing in Vermont. And one of the ways it's able to go about this is it is able to incentivize private developers with this state and federal tax credit to incentivize these private developers to construct and preserve affordable housing in Vermont. So supporting these low and moderate income residents. However, specifically for this type of tax credit, it is only accessible to larger developers. So we're kind of wondering if there are any other similar programs that exist that may incentivize individual property owners that they could take advantage of. So ultimately, our goal is just to promote these types of funding options, or perhaps ask those on the Bristol Housing Commission on if there are other existing funding options. Given that certain property owners may be aware of the need for more housing and the housing crisis, but don't know the funding opportunities that currently exist and how to secure them, and if we can help facilitate and grant these opportunities or ease the process of application for some of these residents. And we can move on to question 3 now.
All right, so moving on to question 3, this question looks at non-financial barriers that exist to these projects and what kind of resources we can provide to potential developers to help assist them. So first, resource accessibility. So property owners may not know about existing resources. It's a very lengthy, time-consuming process. There's a lot of research that goes into it, even when, we're not looking to build, but we were, trying to gain a sense of, how does someone actually go about building an ADU or converting a garage? There's so many things out there. So maybe providing a quick access guide for developers or homeowners to actually gain some information that's easily accessible. And then another thing we were looking at is just optional oversight or review of projects such as ADUs to counter the recent buy rate law per the state. So the state made it a lot easier for people to build ADUs with the regulations. But we were thinking, maybe the committee or the Bristol could offer kind of like an advisory role, maybe where you could engage the community to make everyone happy and not have like another Garfield Street like ADU situation. And then available structures. So when we were walking around Bristol, we realized that there's not exactly a lot of available space for developers to go in and make new homes. So we were wondering how many properties in Bristol actually exist that would be open to these adaptive reuse projects. And then we were wondering if we can target these. Hold on, I'm not seeing it. If we could target these properties specifically. Later on, we'll kind of go over an idea that we had about doing like a survey, walking around and seeing what properties are actually available, and see if we could reach the owners and reach out and see what they thought about converting their property.
All right, and then we have remaining questions and next steps. And what Alden was just talking about kind of trails along and is included in our questions, in that we can't really move forward until we know what potential there is in Bristol, given that we're so focused on not new construction and using what's already there. But I would say our next biggest question is, how can we encourage homeowners to participate in this kind of adaptive reuse? When we're talking about things like turning a big single family home into a duplex, or renovating a garage, or encouraging a commercial property owner to add residential units above the retail space, we have to remember that while it's something that's really important for the greater good of the community, it still requires a bit of a sacrifice and a big commitment from the property owner. So I think this is something that we'll be working with in conjunction with the education and outreach committee, in terms of, we really just want to make it as easy as possible for these people to do something that's helpful for the community, knowing that while it's helping the community, it does change their situation. And just being aware of everything that comes with taking on a project like this. And then for next steps, we have a meeting with John Moyers tomorrow. We've seen a couple buildings from the outside, but we're excited to hear more about specific issues that he's faced, particularly with the trading post and maybe getting that to be senior housing or 8 apartments instead of the 4. As mentioned earlier, we're hoping to meet with Jim Mendel soon. And then Callie is currently working on looking at zoning information in other towns that's relevant to kind of what we've been talking about with units per acre and allowable use and development of multifamily complexes and such. And then, as Alden was just saying, we got a bit of a sense for the town yesterday or last week, but we'd love to take another walk through and look really intentionally at buildings like carriage houses and garages, and maybe jot down addresses, get a sense of where in the community those buildings that are currently not being used as residential spaces are, so that we can specifically target the resources that Alden mentioned at those homeowners. Because I think it's really, when you see a flyer, you hear about a meeting, it's easy to overlook how you might be able to make an impact. But by reaching out specifically, we're hoping that we can encourage people to take on these projects individually. And that's kind of the adaptive use campaign that we're talking about, just spreading that information, because ultimately the biggest challenge of increasing density without new development is that it's done by individuals. It's not just a private developer that comes in and puts up 15, 20 apartments. It's happens little by little, and it's all done by individual owners. So that's where we're at for now. But if you have any questions, we're happy to try to answer.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
John
do.
does.
John?
Just a quick, earlier in the presentation, you mentioned building costs. If you want to get just or come up with a rough estimate of building a renovation cost, I would suggest something on the very low end would be $200 a square foot. So if you're doing a renovation on a 1,000 square foot building, it's $200,000 at least, and depending on the level of code you have to meet or the degree of finish or fineness you want, you could easily be up to $300 a square foot these days and beyond. Those are current numbers I have from friends who are home builders. So that's a home building number, but roughly equivalent for anything. So if you want to just jump to an estimate, I would give you those numbers.
Anybody else? So I have a couple thoughts, if I could, is when you talked about interviewing individuals, have you talked with regional planning, specifically Katie Myers, Rakoff Myers, who is a planner for the regional planning, and she lives in town and has been instrumental in housing, both for the regional planning and as a former planning commission member. She would be a good source if you haven't contacted her. The other one that is a existing property owner in town, or I don't know if you want to say developer, is Tom Wells. I don't know how accessible he is, but he could give you a perspective on owning property in town and highest uses. The other thing you had mentioned for zoning regs that you're looking at, you mentioned Heinsberg and a few other towns. Heinsberg, I think, is a great example, maybe not for retrofit, but for new construction. I think there's a lot of good things going on there. But I didn't see Middlebury or Virgins on the list, and I don't know if there was a specific reason for that. Virgins in particular mirrors Bristol as the village of Bristol in a lot of different ways. Middlebury maybe not so much, but they're both adjacent towns, and development in those towns as well as Bristol interact, if you will. So I think, thanks for the presentation, and hopefully the comments John and I've made, or if anybody else has a closing comment for you that has kind of helped you to work to the completion of your proposal.
And if you want to look at a really killer carriage house, ask the chairman for a tour. He's got a great one.
Thank you very much. I'll write down all those names and we'll reach out.
Next up we have infill development. I think it might just be best if you share your screen. Kind of old computer.
Fair. All right, we're working on it. See the Zoom page, can you? It's hiding. It is hiding. Here. There you go. Slideshow. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful.
Okay.
All right, we're working on one computer here, so we're just gonna pass it around as we present. But good evening, everyone. This is the infill development in Bristol, Vermont group. So we're focusing on increasing density with new builds. And my name is Isaiah. We have Joe, Aiden, Helena, and Xander. All right, let's get into it. Let's just see if, oh, okay. Might be a click. Here we go.
All right, so for our presentation, we have a little bit of a summary here. We started by looking at the broad scale of looking at GIS data. We made some maps of Bristol that we're excited to share with you. And then we're going to talk about some findings we had by consulting with experts and interviewing residents around Bristol and also, what was the other town?
Heinsberg.
Heinsberg. Yeah, and then some common themes throughout that, lessons learned. And then we talk about next steps and questions. And our research questions, slightly updated from last time. Considering Bristol's physical characteristics, what are the best strategies for infill development, multi-unit buildings or ADUs, or yeah, are the main things we're looking at there. And then can we identify potential sites using GIS, and what are the best the perspectives, the attitudes of the Bristol residents regarding the current and future practices of infill development. Yeah, so jumping into
There we go.
the maps we made. To start, we just looked at the zoning for Bristol, picked out just the residential ones. These are not the most up-to-date zones. We're still working on getting the current ones, but we worked with these for now, and we're gonna update as we go. But we just pulled out the residential zones to do further analysis that Helen is gonna describe.
In this next map, we trying to look at how developed the town is, and we calculated basically the density of building in across the town of Bristol. You would see that in the high density zone, most of the parcels are pretty developed, except this particular pocket here. And most of the residential zone on the periphery are less developed and have potential for larger developments like multi-unit buildings or manufactured homes. Building on that, we identified a few lots that have potential for infills like multi-unit buildings. The orange lots are currently listed as public land in the parcel database, and the brown ones here are currently vacant according to the data we have, as they don't have any building footprint on them at this moment. So based on the information we have, we would say these lots have the potential for maybe larger scale development like manufactured homes or mobile home parks, because it's just more efficient to build larger units for affordable housing uses.
And yeah, so zooming in just to the high density residential zone in Bristol, you can see this area is pretty densely developed already. So we were thinking of focusing more on ADU development in this area, but you can see there are still some lots of this light green color, which means the color corresponds to like the proportion of the lot that is covered by building footprint. So the lighter green has more open space relative to the building footprint. Yeah, so a lot of the research we did focused on ADU development, the like interviewing people and also contacting experts.
Yeah, so that was a good segue into kind of this consulting with local experts. We kind of asked AZ and Elise to kind of help us better understand this housing situation in Bristol. And these are kind of more informal group discussions we had, different than the one-on-one interviews we conducted that we'll talk about later. We walked around the town of Bristol with AZ, and we got to see different housing developments that helped us get a good feel of different completed projects around the town. So kind of like KTP Mobile Home Park, the Bristol Co-housing development, the Firehouse Apartments, and then also the Cottage Park development kind of off of North Street. This kind of reinforced the assumption that infill development is mostly restricted to new ADUs. And there is some potential for larger multi-unit projects or PUD, sorry, like we were talking about earlier. And then when we met with Elise, she was talking about kind of the importance of dense developments like multifamily units, kind of trying to stray away from these single family homes. And she kind of talked about legalizing apartments, which is kind of talking about ending the single family zoning and allowing for more units on one plot of land. And she kind of emphasized it's very hard to solve the housing crisis with just ADUs or single family homes, and that we really do need these more multifamily spaces to effectively solve the housing issue.
Yeah, so that said, given the density of Bristol, we wanted to focus on ADUs quite a bit. So, thank you. Yeah, well,
You keep on tapping it also.
oh, sweet. Great. So many of you may remember the first Zoom meeting we had. We sort of framed conversations we were gonna hopefully have with residents throughout several towns. Feedback is a trickle. So we've only talked to ADU owners or neighbors in Heinsberg and Bristol thus far. We're waiting on responses and lists of ADU owners from several other local towns similar to Bristol. We've had 5 conversations in the past week. Yep. These are their names. And sort of throughout all these interviews, we aimed to qualitatively answer the following question based on Liv's subjective experiences. Our overarching, I guess, ADU research question is, with an eye on keeping the term ADU from becoming a dirty word, what are best practices to proceed with ADU development such that Bristol can represent a success story for future efforts to increase housing density? Not only in Bristol itself going forward, but across the state of Vermont, we're looking elsewhere for good examples now. Hopefully, Bristol can be one going forward. Yeah. So overall, throughout our interviews, we found very positive feedback for ADU development, both in Heinsberg and in Bristol. The one caveat to that is people object when development plans are not executed well. So there's overall strong enthusiasm, but a general desire for development plans to be streamlined and rules to be followed. Much frustration surrounding that stemmed from the development at Garfield Street, which we'll touch on in a second. Everyone we talked to, particularly those in Heinsberg, and then one site up on Mountain Terrace in Bristol, mentioned that the process of getting site plans approved and getting permitting done was surprisingly easy. And they felt that both Heinsberg and Bristol were encouraging regarding ADU development. It's important to note, I think, that most ADU uses in these cases were geared towards older family members, housing them as they grow older, with the intention of renting to other community members in the future. That's important because it meant that these developers were unable to access the VHIP benefits or grants involved with ADU development. So they sort of were scraping by and pulling from different places to try to get their budget up to snuff. Yeah. I think the overarching theme that we saw most was a general desire for good communication, particularly in Bristol. The more neighbors communicate with each other surrounding development, the better. The Mountain Terrace example was a very positive one where the developers reached out to everyone around them and got very positive feedback, and there have been no gripes or conflicts in the neighborhood. So yeah, here's Isaiah with more on Garfield Street.
Awesome. So you guys have all heard about this a little bit, but we wanted to learn more about kind of the most negative case that we had heard about in Bristol so far. So we went and we interviewed both the owner and one of their neighbors just to kind of see both sides of the story and really understand kind of with a humanistic approach of what happened and how we can maybe avoid that in the future. So some of the concerns that were voiced were mostly regarding the size, appearance, and the use of the ADU, which fell under older, less strict regulations from the last zoning administrator. I believe that the foundation was built at 1,200 square feet, and there wasn't any really height maximum. And I think a lot of people thought that they weren't or were unsure about the use of it since there was supposed to be a club out of the first floor. So people were confused about that. And then, yeah, neighbors just felt surprised after the construction began. And they noted that they felt that there was a lack of conversation and transparency around the specifications of the ADU, which really kind of fueled some of the more negative feelings around that, just that lack of transparency. And then solutions and things that we found that went well is, well, I guess just to note now, we talked to both sides of this conflict, this mini conflict, I guess. And everyone said that now that the ADU has been constructed, everyone's on more or less good terms. No one really has any hard feelings about it anymore, which is really nice to see that an issue like that can blow up so much and then really mellow out. But the neighbors that we talked to were excited to learn about the new size and height regulations that were passed, such as the 900 feet maximum or the 20% lower than the height of the primary dwelling. So they thought that that would remediate some of the concerns that were connected to the original construction of the Garfield Street ADU. Everyone agreed that more engaged conversations would benefit both sides. Communication really goes a long way, and the neighbors wish that they could have had a little bit more opportunity to do so before the construction began. And then the owner voiced a desire for there to be more community outreach around ADUs to emphasize the immediate need for building new housing, and recognize that people didn't like the appearance, but that he thought that the need for new housing is the most important. So I think that's all a perspective that we can acknowledge and appreciate, even if maybe he built it in a way that his neighbors didn't appreciate. So that conflict aside, the lessons that we have learned throughout both the GIS study and the interviews is that Bristol's limited space for larger infill projects near downtown, but still some potential, especially on the periphery. We found that ADUs are best suited for areas closer to downtown through our walking tour and also our GIS density analysis. Financial barriers were found to be the greatest for ADU development. We mentioned the VHIP loan not being able to be used if you are trying to move a family member in first, and that's mostly because the grant necessitates that you pick someone out of a pool of those in the most need for housing. So that might not necessarily cover a family member. And then focusing on strong communication and community conflict resolution between neighbors is key for successful development that does not disrupt the community in the long term. Education and outreach is equally important to help the community understand and accept new changes. And this will be covered a lot more by our last group, the community outreach. And then the overall positive perception of ADUs, even from the neighbors that really liked the idea of ADUs, just didn't enjoy the one there that happened to be in their backyard, highlights their potential as a viable and beneficial approach for future infill development in Bristol. And then here we have.
Yeah, so we made a community survey to kind of collect the town's feelings about ADUs and ADU development. And we're currently collecting responses on this survey. So we would love you guys to kind of either visit this URL we have down here or scan the QR code and fill out the survey if you're able to, and also share it with your neighbors. We'll put this link in the chat and also get this flyer to you guys. But we've put some of these flyers around town, so you might have seen them, and we've posted to, I think, Front Porch and maybe the Facebook group as well. So this is something we're working on to try and get kind of feelings of ADUs in Bristol. This kind of leads us into our next steps. So we want to kind of integrate this updated GIS zoning layer, which Aiden was talking about, to kind of get a more accurate map of Bristol, and then gather more input from experts and various stakeholders in the town of Bristol. Yeah, some of us are going to go meet with John Morris tomorrow to kind of get more information from him. Obviously, yeah, collect and gather more responses from the survey, and then kind of discuss potential regulation changes, like maximum density or no maximum density setbacks from neighbors' housing, which has been successful in other towns in Vermont. And obviously encouraging conversations with neighbors. That's a crucial step to try and not taint the name of ADUs.
Yeah, so that's our presentation. We just wrote down a couple questions that we might have for you. And then obviously we'd love to hear any feedback regardless of these specific questions. But is there anything else that would be valuable to see in our maps? We were working with a lot of data and we didn't include any maps of like slope or flooding just because it wasn't super relevant because all of the places that has been developed and is being developed on isn't really in a flood zone or affected by any steep slopes. But any other data that you guys might want to see, we could easily put together in our maps. We were wondering if we should delve in further and do site-specific analyses for larger projects. So going to these zones that we've identified on the map to be potentially good sites for infill, we could go in person and look at them and do a little bit more of a deeper analysis. And then, are there any other questions that we should be asking residents? Just besides the ones that we kind of summarized in our overview of the interviews. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.
So is there any comments or questions for this group from the Planning Commission?
I just want to say thank you for making me the town administrator. That was a really nice
I
upgrade.
did. I guess I have a couple thoughts, if I will, if nobody else has any comments at this point. I think one thing, and let me back up a little bit. Of course, I think you're probably very well aware of this, that single family houses, ADUs, and actually duplexes are there's state protections for those, so there are sometimes those are just a plain old permitted use. And the Garfield Street, which has been very controversial, as you found out, is not only a question of ADUs and building ADUs, but there was some significant errors in the permit issuing. And if those errors were not part of the permit process, how that may have looked or not. So I think we can't hold that as a properly permitted ADU. And I don't know if you were aware of that or not.
Yeah,
Sure.
so in our research and our conversations, it seemed like we gathered that the footprint was actually larger than even the old maximum, and it just happened to be approved, maybe unduly so, which I think is what sparked a lot of the backlash for it.
Yes,
And
so
then-
there
Correct
was,
me if I'm wrong, but I saw in the zoning regulations that duplexes aren't able to construct ADUs. I don't know
correct.
if that was a new addition or if that's been the case forever, but so we recognize some of those faults that I think were some of the exigents for a lot of this negative feelings, which is almost consoling in the sense of like, as long as the neighbors recognize this too, as long as these projects are done according to the zoning and the regulations, then, you know, the chance of people having negative emotions towards it is much lower.
Yes, so there, you're exactly right. There was two errors in the permitting process. Is one, the footprint of the building was oversized from what was allowed. And the other was, ADUs are only allowed as a ADU. And single family dwellings, and that was a duplex. So the other thing is, when we did our bylaw modernization grant, and it was an informal survey, but we did a survey with regional planning who helped us as the consultant for that. And we identified a majority of the duplexes, ADUs, and multifamily houses in the village planning area. So I don't know if you are aware of that information or have reached out to regional planning, but some of that work has been done and may or may not be a benefit to you.
Good to know. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your presentation. Great job.
Yeah, I love the maps. Keep it up. I would just, something, I don't know. Because with residential developments, you need to have wastewater. I don't know if that's possible to put in of just like soil suitability. Most of the village perks well, but something to consider if possible to put in the maps.
Yeah, I think there's a statewide data layer of soil types and soil drainage. I'm not sure how accurate that is for Bristol, but we can definitely look into that and add that to the map to the best of our ability.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, up next we have infrastructure. Let's talk about septic.
I can share my screen.
Thank you.
Uh, Actually, sorry, can one of my other group members? It's not. They're not showing up.
Yeah, I can try and share. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I can do it. Without sharing. Okay, let's see. I don't know how I can. Give me 1 second. Okay. There we go. Is this hopefully working now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So these are again, we're the infrastructure group. I'm Emma. I don't and then
I'm Oscar.
I'm Sherman. And hi, I'm Jack.
okay. So diving right into it, our questions have remained pretty much kind of the same since the beginning. Again, looking at what existing infrastructure Bristol already has and kind of the current status of those systems. And then as well as in looking at expansion, how can Bristol expand both with eco-friendly, cost-friendly, and efficient, sustainable solutions? And kind of what are some of the regulations or potential challenges that expansion faces? And then on the right, we have a bit of agenda for the night. So first, primary findings, and then we want to look into our funding sources, source reduction, and the next steps we've been looking at.
Yeah, so a primary focus for our group has been decentralized systems. So through our research, we found that the two main barriers to new septic installation are the complicated and extensive rules that are in place about isolation and the slope of the ground and the depth at which the septic tank needs to be, and then just the outright expensive installation costs. Some good news is that Bristol has great soils, which makes it very feasible to install new systems. And through research, we found that the most viable option are going to be cluster septic systems, which will be shared. This is the most cost effective because for a group of houses, you can do the whole process of finding an appropriate place for the septic and then spending the money to get it installed only once instead of having to do it numerous times. And the best practice example we came across during our walking tour of Bristol was the Bristol co-housing development. Of course, you all know about this, but it has a shared septic system in the center that serves 14 different units. And along the tour, I was looking around and saw some other sites that I thought might be appropriate for similar projects. I noticed in particular the corner of West Pleasant and Liberty, and then along Maple Street, along Plank Road, and then at the corner of Hazel and Moncton. And in general, we think that these systems are the best just because it really reduces those two barriers a lot by making it so that you only have to install one system and you only have to hire one person one time to find an appropriate place to put that septic system when you do install it.
Yeah, and so again, looking at kind of the future goal, we were talking with Brent Rakowski, engineer over at Otter Creek Engineering, and we were put in touch with him through Elise as he did a lot of the engineering over at the Bristol Firehouse Apartments. But so he was really pushing for the fact that an eventual achievement of like a true public wastewater treatment facility would be huge, but obviously this comes at a huge cost. So we'll get into that in a second. But again, Bristol is very well equipped for decentralized systems, but if there were to be a true wastewater treatment facility that extends beyond the core downtown, just more development would be created and made feasible. And so kind of looking into some examples and case studies of wastewater treatment facilities, we looked into Virgins, which in 2022 really started a rehaul of their wastewater treatment facility. But again, this brings up the issue of cost. I mean, their project, their initiative was over $25 million, and which they received 2 sets of funding for, basically in 17.5 and $7.5 million groupings. And so again, that's the real cost that of creating a treatment facility. And again, that's not entirely feasible for many towns, especially Bristol. I mean, just at any given time. We also looked into Warren, who I think it was Warren, Vermont, which in 2002, I believe, also updated their wastewater treatment facilities. So there are definitely plenty of examples of other areas in Vermont that have done so. But again, like the biggest thing we're seeing is the cost. And so I'll let Sherman kind of get into that.
Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about the sources of funding for these projects. So the first one and the most important one is EPA grants. So this includes Clean Water State Revolving Fund, also environmental justice grants, and etc. We also have the sewer district budget. That's about $50K per year, and it comes with extra unallocated money from previous years. And the debt retirement of the current system stood at about $11,000 to $12,000 a year. We also have the Vermont state grants, the Clean Water Initiative, and etc. And we also have the fees paid by users and potentially VHIP. That's about up to $50,000 per project for private projects. So the main takeaway is that currently the municipal system has a lot of unused space. So the current flow is under 10,000 gallons per day versus the 30,000 gallon per day design capacity. So for now, on-site decentralized system is feasible, and we have a lot of capacity remaining for the municipal system. But in the future, expanding municipal system may be more cost effective, according to Brent Rakowski from Otter Creek Engineering. So I'm going to talk a little bit about upgrading the municipal system. So our main argument is that further upgrades may be feasible in the future. In 2018, the town expanded the capacity from 20,000 gallons per day to 30,000 gallons per day now. So it added an extra 10,000 gallons per day uncommitted reserve capacity. And that's about a new 50-table restaurant. And the town used a SafetyTech package solution that cost about $700,000 in 2018. That's about $900,000 now. So we calculated the costs. The average household produces about 100 gallons per day of wastewater per person, most of which is gray water, which we'll talk about later. But expanding municipal system has a great potential. So if you calculate $900,000 divided by 100, that would be $9,000 per person investment. And if you take a 20-year loan and factor in a 4.5% interest rate and about 3% inflation, that's just about $600 per person per year, or $50 per person per month. So that's a pretty manageable cost according to our research. So yeah, And according to the civil engineer, Brent, Bristol doesn't have an I&I problem, inflow and infiltration, which means that the storm water doesn't get into the wastewater treatment that much. So that's not a big factor. It is a big factor in other cities and towns, but it's not a big problem for Bristol. So a municipal system can also be very effective because of this. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the, you go to the previous slide.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
are we including that one today, or do we want to save that one for?
Do you want to do it? Oscar?
You can talk about it, yeah.
Okay. I can get it to go back.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk a little bit about the cost of building a gray water system. So that's one of the main arguments we're making. So gray water systems are usually incredibly simple. So gray water is anything that's not, flush down toilets. So like laundry water or like, the water that you use to wash your hands. An example is shown on the left. So in this household, without modifying the existing plumbing, you can use laundry water for irrigation of plants. And the whole apparatus costs around, $300. And if you can't install it yourself, you can, hire someone to install it for you, and it's costs about like $1,000. So it's also a feasible option for individual private developers. Yeah, so and Oscar is going to talk a little bit more about gray water systems in just a moment.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little about source reduction strategies and sort of alternative wastewater management, which can be very cost-effective ways to reduce the actual volume of wastewater being put into the system, which can allow for an increased capacity of septic tanks that do exist, as well as reducing pollutant loads. And in general, they create more sustainable and cheaper homes to live in because of the lower usage of water. Next. Yeah, so something that people may be familiar with are water conserving fixtures. These include the dual flush toilets, low flow shower heads, and aerated faucets. And these can be implemented in existing housing or included within new developments as just a way to reduce the load on wastewater systems and again increase capacity. And then, yeah, going back to what Sherman began talking about with gray water systems, um, as he said, gray water is anything that's not used in toilets, which is referred to as black water. And it takes about up to about 50 to 80% of residential water use. So it's a really high proportion of that. And gray water systems are a way to, again, further reduce the flow of wastewater, allow for smaller septics, more sustainable homes. Um, these systems are very dependent on legislation and what the state defines as gray water, which is what the civil engineer was talking to us about. And Vermont is kind of in the recent years has had legislation come in that has sort of changed regulations for alternative wastewater, and that's something we will look into more specifically. But there are examples of gray water systems being used within Vermont. Yeah, so at Vermont Law School has the Clivus composting gray water system, which involves flushing toilets that use soap foam instead of water. And then the entire system is only discharging gray water, as well as being able to convert human waste into safe end products. And the cost and feasibility of these projects is kind of a bigger question around them. But they do provide kind of a more sustainable and in the long run cheap way for houses to have a more efficient wastewater system.
And so a couple of things we want to look at next, definitely looking into, again, the detailed costs of gray water treatment systems, but then also kind of the feasibility and cost estimates of what it would look like to further expand the municipal system. And then also how we could find more potential sources for funding for private projects. And so we're talking with Jill Marzano from Vermont as the correspondent for Bristol's wastewater management. And we're hoping she can give us some more insight on a couple of things, including funding, but also kind of isolation zones, regulations, and other things that might be competing with the creation of developments relative to infrastructure. Also, again, Elise Schambacher from Madison Housing Works, she had to figure out a bunch of funding for the Bristol firehouse apartments before they could send that out to Brent. So that would be another great person to get in touch with about that. And also she was discussing the A&R pathway and how there are future examples where areas that already have their own septic systems could be potentially hooked onto by future developments. So we want to look into that, and then also continuing with best practices research. So now happy to send it over to any questions, comments from the commission here. Thank you.
Any questions, comments for this group?
Not for me, no.
Okay, thank you very much.
Last up we have community education. Michael, you're gonna share.
Yeah, I can do that.
Lovely. And then you can come sit at the table with us. Come on up. Come on up. Join the owl.
Yeah,
It doesn't
you
bite.
can pick a seat too.
Sit right here. Let's see, that's Sharon. And is the rest of my group on Zoom and unmuted?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. My name is Michael Matheson. I'm part of the community education subgroup. If my other members could introduce themselves.
I'm Hugh Hutchinson.
I'm Riley Fouché.
And then Riley, did you want to start us off?
Yeah. Do you get the next slide?
Yes.
So for our basic agenda and kind of how we've been framing our research, we're primarily concerned with how to settle potential conflicts between neighbors over new builds and just general changes to their property, and how to promote what we're kind of calling responsible density, which is, you know, how to increase density within Bristol while addressing the legitimate concerns that people might have with this. So this presentation is going to include kind of our guiding questions, the methods we've used, and some of the challenges we faced, why, how, and what to communicate with neighbors before building, and then our proposed final product and the next steps that we're planning on taking. So far, we've looked at a lot of literature, both, you know, reading up on current events about housing within Bristol and just Addison County as general, and then academic sources about housing, and especially kind of conflicts relating to housing and kind of how to build cohesion within constructing neighborhoods and development. We've also met with a variety of experts, met with Charles Dillard, who's the director of the Burlington Office of City Planning, AZ Larson, administrator of Bristol Planning and Zoning, John Moyers, commissioner on the Bristol Planning Commission, and Elise Schambacher, the executive director of Addison Housing Works. And we are trying to meet with Sarah Stroop, who's the director of conflict transformation and a professor here at Middlebury. And the main challenge we've faced is that community education is a lot more of a broad topic than some of the other groups, and that we've had to kind of focus on how, like, what we want this education to mean, and kind of specify what our product is going to be. And so that has taken up a lot of what we've done so far, and kind of, I think we've, you know, we've decided now to focus more on kind of like settling conflicts and kind of the interpersonal side of housing developments.
Yeah, and so if you look at the regional housing survey, we see that I think about 80% of Addison County residents support new development. But there has been conflict and there is potential for more conflict if even if builders follow all the legal parameters for the build. And so we're suggesting that neighbors should have early and open conversations about the projects they plan to undertake, rather than builders trying to sidestep the appeals process by not properly posting the permit notice or not notifying their neighbors before that notice goes up. And we recognize that these situations where there's not proper notice might not always be with malicious intent. And often it's just a lack of communication. And we just want to say that the benefits of this proactive communication are not just being a nice neighbor, which we would agree is the ideal, but there's also monetary and social costs for disruptive builds, even if they follow all like the legal parameters in the build. So we'll expand on that in the next slide. So specific issues that homeowners who build on the property should address with their neighbors before undertaking those builds should be noise pollution, whether it be an HVAC system or just general noise that will come from the dwelling unit. Light pollution. For example, you don't want to have a floodlight directed straight towards your neighbor's window or backyard. Intrusive window placement, like we might see at the Garfield Street build. Parking, and maybe you implement landscaping in the build to mitigate the impact of the aforementioned factors, and then just generally the height, scale, and location of the build on the property. All of these factors should definitely be discussed between neighbors before the building process starts.
As Hugh was saying, there are monetary and social consequences to not engaging with good communication. Oftentimes, conflicted situations could have just been avoided if you would have brought it up to your neighbor in the first place. So what we're trying to do is how exactly can we create a process that encourages people having beneficial communication with their neighbors, as well as producing something that the planning commission could use or turn people towards in the future. So the first thing we want to produce for you guys is create a one-pager focusing on simplifying the explanations of the permitting and appeals process. So that when people come into the office, they can see a simple flow chart and have something to reference as they're going through this process. So we see this as looking at where exactly would this information be useful at? We feel like online, possibly in the planning office, would be good areas, as well as incorporating things like QR codes and links to wider resources related to the topic for those that want to learn more. This could include something like how to build an ADU guide. There's one out of Middlebury, if I remember correctly, that could easily be hyperlinked that people can access when they are beginning this process. We also see it as something that could be handed to individuals when they start, when they come into the planning department and say, hey, I want to build an ADU. Where should I start? This is one of these resources. We also wanted to include a section on appeals and when it is proper to appeal and alternates to a formal appeal. So maybe go and ask your neighbor before the 15-day window, hey, these are my concerns, and see if you can settle it before going to a formal review that could cost every great time and money. Our next thing we're wanting to produce for you guys is a pamphlet titled Want to Build an ADU, Want Happy Neighbors. And this is going over those issues that Hugh just mentioned, including noise, light, and views, and providing a quick one-page, two-page document that has a checklist of, hey, these are things you'd want to consider for your neighbors when you're going through the planning process and working with an architect. As well as kind of flipping the script and asking people on the second half of it, imagine you're in your neighbor's position, how would you feel about this development being next door to you? And again, this is something that we see that could be handed out when somebody comes in saying, hey, I want to develop an ADU, or hey, I want to build a single family or a duplex, where it's not so much a change in regulations, but rather an additional resource that may be able to hedge off issues down the road. I want to kind of show you guys one of these issues real quick. On the left is a photo of what floodlights look like from a neighboring property. In the middle of the night, they can be very bright, especially with minimal curtains, as you can see. And that's an example of bad lighting for neighbors. And it's often the type of lighting that causes issues. On the right is an example of step lighting, which focuses the light down so people can see where they're walking and be safe, but doesn't create light pollution to the neighbors or light pollution to the environment, which often has a lot more favorability, both environmentally also with people you're around. And you have similar things with noise views and the rest of the issues we've discussed, where there are ways to overcome these problems by working with people before you get to the building phase. Another idea we have been floating around is resource library. So we stopped by the library in town and asked, hey, do you have any books on ADUs? And the answer was no. They could look and see if they could request one. So we're thinking that something that would be a cheap solution. There's a few good guides on how to build an ADU, what considerations to have, what am I getting into? And we thought partnering with the library to bring 3 to 5 books that people could access and the zoning department could point people to could be a good way of increasing community access to resources that are a little bit more thorough than simple online reports. Another option is the planning commission or planning office could buy 3 or 4 books, about $20 to $50 used, and have their own little stash of resources that they could let people use. So that's a cheap option that can expand educational opportunities. Last bit is next steps, which we want to research the existence of pre-approval programs. These are programs where plans for ADUs or single family, I've seen ones up to 4plexes, have been pre-approved by the planning department and have plans already designed by an architect. Often these are at smaller fees, $500 to $1,000, rather than the $10,000 expectation for most new designs. So this is a way in which we can lower costs by engaging in other programs. So we want to see if what's going on in Vermont right now and see if there's anything that could be brought into or used by the planning commission. We also want to look at South Bend, Indiana. That has one of the most famous examples of a prolific program that sees something like 30% of new development being pre-approved. That is saving a lot of money. As we discussed, we want to design 2 or 3 of these pamphlets for you guys to use and distribute as you see fit. And third option is we want to develop an education outreach program plan. This is basically to answer questions: what can we do when we don't want to get the community involved? We want to provide different entry points and options that say, how much effort would this cost in time? What options need a budget, and how much would that be? So in future community work, you have a reference sheet that says, this is our plan with these resources to engage in community outreach. And these are what we're wanting to provide for the commission, and we'd love to hear any feedback or concerns you may have.
Does anybody have any questions for this group?
A lot of head shaking.
No. I have a couple thoughts for what it's worth. We have mixed together multifamily and ADUs in the same sentence a lot. Not just your group, some of the other groups as well. And I think there's a distinction that single family ADUs and duplexes are permitted uses. So if you meet all the setback requirements that are defined for those particular constructions, it's a permit granted. And then there was a debate as well about multifamily as to whether you would have to, and currently you go through a different process that invokes a certain review and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of confusion amongst people that ADUs and duplexes in particular should be requiring the same review through a public hearing process sometimes. And I don't know if maybe that's something to consider too, the appropriateness of the types of review that whatever the building functions might be. And it's a great thing, and I like the concept that you're looking to voluntarily get people to think about communications ahead of time. I think that's very important. But for those three types of building, all too often that becomes optional because it's if you meet these setbacks, you've got a permit type thing. The other thing that we've experienced as far as communications is concerned is we, like all the surrounding towns, as far as I can see, post per their statutory requirements, which is you put a permit somewhere that you can see from the street, not necessarily read. You can see it from the street. So if it's like taped in a window, for instance, it's hard to see. And, you know, sometimes people say, I never saw anything posted while it was in the window and they didn't notice it type thing. We've struggled with that a lot. And when we went through the last hearing process, we heard a lot about, I didn't know that was going on because I didn't see the post, you know, and it was like, well, it was posted in the window, that type of thing. So, and I don't know if that is at this point expanding beyond what your thought process either is, but there's a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it expectation in the community, but there's a lot of desire, maybe that's a better word, desire in the community to have a more robust posting process. And you know, we've batted around a few things. We talked about getting some of those, you know, those political signs, you know, and have that be the permit. But we haven't got there yet, you know. And so I think as far as communication is concerned, yeah, the upfront stuff is definitely good. And I think you've got a lot of good ideas going on there, but there's some backdoor stuff too, like how people understand what is something that they can weigh in on from a quality perspective as opposed to a quantity perspective, and what sort of notice or what sort of attention getting things there are that would drive them to see that, okay, there's something going on. I didn't get involved in the upfront stuff, but I can see there's something going on now.
Yeah.
And there's a grace period, and 15 days isn't that much of a grace period, which is a state statute, and that'll breeze right by. And you know, you have older people going to Florida and they don't come back until March or April. So that's probably enough rambling on that. But I think if you're looking to round out some edges, there's some things to think about.
I appreciate that. I'm curious, does the town have the authority to increase the minimum size of like a notice, or is that regulated by the state?
No, I think
We could make them bigger. It's just.
No.
Yeah, I could print them on 11 by 17.
Yeah, you can make things, you can't make it less restrictive than what the statute states, but if you want to go beyond the statute, you can do that.
Okay.
I mean, so,
And then, if we could arrange maybe a time to talk to you a little bit more about the idea of looking in, to, more robust, grace period or, sign size, if that'd be possible.
yeah, you could do that.
Okay.
Or you could, I mean, AZ has a lot of thoughts on that as well.
We met this morning.
You did,
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, I'm open to that if you want to set up something.
And we can talk more too.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
I have
Anybody
a question or comment.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Yeah, you guys were talking about one pagers, sort of informational one pagers. Sticking to the question of ADUs strictly, since those are going to be built by resident homeowners, non-professional builders. I wonder what a one pager would look like. You know, if somebody comes in and says, I want to build an ADU, then could the town give them a page that says, great, you want to build an ADU? Please consider these things: noise, light, parking, views, whatever. That's not regulatory, it's not a requirement, but it alerts those non-professional builders before they commit to certain, actually building to these issues. And right now, I don't think the town does that in any formalized way. And if we had a tool and somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to build an ADU, like, okay, great, here's what you need to know, but here's the things, keep noise, light, and those things in mind, that would be really helpful. The state apparently is telling us we're not allowed, towns are not allowed to regulate ADUs for those things. So maybe we can get ahead of problems by educating these non-professional homeowning builders about those things. If they haven't thought about them, maybe they've already thought about them, that'd be great. But if they hadn't, the town would be doing a good service to the potential neighbors by starting that education process right then.
Thank you. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is this booklet, we got this when we did the bylaw modernization thing. I don't know if you've seen that. And it's and that's co-housing on the front, by the way.
Oh, that's really neat.
So anyway, that kind of is a condensed version of all the strategies that you could be considering when you're doing some bylaw modernization. Now you have to, there you go.
I have extras of these if anyone wants them. It's a good
Yeah,
read.
we only have it in the electronic format, so the paper one might be good too.
Well, you could take them back, right?
Yeah, Michael, you're tasked with bringing them back.
One for me. I'm gonna keep one for me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Cool. Any other PC questions?
Not a question, but just a compliment on the work done thus far. It's really interesting to hear your presentations, and I'm sure you're learning that these issues are, interesting to grapple with and important to people. It involves our communities and our homes, our refuges, our neighbors, the place that we look to for, our root. And so it involves really important issues. And if we're going to live closer, we need to live smarter with each other. So you're on the right paths. Thanks.
Rob, you have any closing thoughts?
Patrick, no.
Nope. Just enjoying all the different takes on topics that we've batted around in the past, and that's just soaking it in.
Thanks. How about you, Shannon?
No, I found all that very interesting, but I don't have any additional sentiments.
Thanks. And Melissa, you,
Oh, Melissa's sick.
There you are. Okay, sorry. I got to get my mic down here. Yeah, no, I just really great presentations, great work, and I think it's gonna really help us out a lot and going forward.
okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, everyone. The presentations look
And
great.
thank you for taking the time to come on.
I appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Michael. be in touch. You guys can stick around if you want to see me do a presentation, but that's not a requirement.
They're like, no, thank you.
bye.
No, you're welcome to stay.
I don't know,
Otherwise,
I'm
I'll
kind of
email you
interested,
all.
what's it gonna be about, AC?
Well, it is on the agenda.
I don't have that open at the moment.
I'm presenting an interim bylaw, so if anyone's interested in interim bylaws and the processes behind that. I'm also, it is, you can go. You're,
I'm listening.
Okay, so we will move on to item 4, which is new business, which is what AZ was talking about.
Mhm. Oh, they didn't want to stay, did they? Some do. Yay. Oh, nice. All right. This is more for the planning commission. I'm proposing an interim bylaw with the help of Ian. An interim bylaw, some legislative background. Interim bylaw can be proposed and approved by a municipality if they're in the process of considering a bylaw, a comprehensive plan, an amendment, extension, in order to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare and provide for orderly and physical economic growth. The planning commission is currently working on the town plan update. That's what all these students have been researching and presenting on. And with the update on the comprehensive plan, zoning regulations come into kind of an update as well. And what I'm focusing on here mostly is the providing orderly economic growth. The legislative body has a couple criteria that you have to look at when approving an interim bylaw. And that is the capacity of existing facilities, services, and lands, the existing patterns and uses of development, environmental limitations, and existing municipal plans and other bylaws that might be impacted. A big reason why I'm proposing an interim bylaw is one, time. It takes some time to get bylaws updated. I know we just approved the bylaw modernization updates to the regulations, the ADU changes, changes to uses in the allowed table. So the time to get updates in has kind of passed, but with an interim bylaw, it would give the select board the power to approve a bylaw that has a 1 year or 2 year limit. And in that time, it is interim. The planning commission, when it is time, can change it. Getting ahead of myself, speaking of time. Some other things that have brought up this interim bylaw proposal are the town of Bristol received a grant with Green Mountain Power to put in a level 3 charging facility. I'll talk a little bit more about what a level 3 EV charging facility means and looks like. But we received a really big grant to put one in downtown, which would really boost connectivity, especially with EVs being pushed at the state level, with residents using EVs, with EVs just kind of becoming this new push, similar to solar and wind. Technology is constantly evolving, and we're not always able to keep up with it, which happens. But another element is the Firehouse EV application. They applied for one earlier this year, but due to the zoning regulations that we currently have, they would have had to open up their conditional use application and essentially make an amendment to that, which they did not want to do, and they withdrew their application, which prevents their residents from accessing sustainable transportation methods, as well as just kind of puts a crunch on other economic development in the future, as we don't have any regulations currently, and it prevents future development not only in the downtown, but in these residential areas as well. Just another look at legislative context. The state is really pushing a EV network. This is from the 2021 legislative session. And they're really pushing to create basically a network of level 3 chargers, where people can essentially map throughout the state. And with the GMP grant that Bristol received, that would put us in that network, which would be a really big economic boost for folks in the downtown area, especially if people are coming, charging their car at a level 3 charger, walking downtown. They're using they're going to Cubbers, they're going to Honey Lights, is that it?
Honey Lights.
Honey Lights. They're shopping in our downtown district, they're walking around, and then they're back in their cars and out back driving. Looking at some definitions that I think are important in this bylaw. Electric vehicles, it's a class of automobiles that uses electric motors, and they draw energy from the grid or off-grid electronic sources. And then electric vehicle charging facilities. These two definitions I identified as the most important for this bylaw, and kind of adding into the definitions of the regulations. Electric vehicle charging facilities are defined as the public or private parking spaces served by ESVs, which are the equipment, and that includes the signs, information, the pavement surfaces, the surface markings, the charger ports themselves, which are necessary for recharging. There are 3 different types of chargers. The first one is a level 1. This is what you're going to have at your house. I'm sure you have an EV, right, Kevin? So do you have a level 1 already?
We have a level 2.
You have a level 2. Oh,
Yeah, as a tangent, level 1s are just like a panic. If you're in a panic.
yeah. So, level 1s are a panic, according to Kevin. But we have level 1, which is like a basic charge, plug it into your outlet. Level 2, getting a little bit more advanced, taking a little bit more of an electric charge, faster charge time, and then a level 3, which is a direct current fast charging electric vehicle service equipment. This is what the grant is for. These are the ones that you usually see with like the Tesla charging stations. They're kind of like I would say they're the size of a refrigerator, and they charge cars fast. There's different types of charging outlets, but the most charger ports fit a wide variety of makes and models. Moving into how I'm proposing fitting EVs into the regulations is, first, level 1 chargers are exempt. These are the ones that you're going to be putting into your house. They don't really have any structure to kind of ground. They're more of a utility that you're adding on. So my proposal is to have level 1 chargers exempt, similar to rooftop solar in the regulations. And then I'm proposing that we add a section in Article 6. But with that, there are some elements that I believe need to be considered: parking, signage, and performance standards. These are necessary when you look at site plan review and other major development review, if you're going to the development review board. But for this, I'm proposing that we add it as conditions on specific uses. So here, this is my proposal for adding in electric vehicle charging facilities into Article 6. This is my proposal of just electric vehicle charging facilities, non-exempt, will constitute a permitted accessory use within all districts, subject to meeting the dimensional standards within the regulations. The one change is that charging facilities within the village business district will be subject to site plan review. My thinking behind this is that in the downtown design area, you already have to go to the downtown design review committee and get their approval. But also the village business district is really where I would see level 3 and like bigger charging facilities go in. That would necessitate going through that larger process. And criteria that I identified as needing to be considered further. Electric vehicle charging stations should be placed in a way that protects the equipment and prevents any damage from cars, from snowplows. We don't want to damage town equipment, other people's equipment when moving snow. We want to protect investments into these EV charging facilities. Another criteria would be that there must be one parking spot per charger port. Can't just put a charger in a parking lot and just say willy-nilly. There has to be a dedicated spot. Not that it's saying it's dedicated, just you have to show you have an outdated. Yeah. And then lastly, any signs that are associated with the electric vehicle charging facilities must follow the criteria specified in the regulations covering signs. And then I have a proposed update to the use matrix. I put electric vehicle charging facilities as permitted in all districts except for site village business where there's site plan. I also put it as site plan in conservation. Just because one, I don't know who would be putting a level 3 charging facility out in conservation in the first place. But also as it is the conservation district and a focus on protecting the natural environment of that area, having higher protections. And then for the Bristol Pond district, no EVs, as that's although you could have EVs, the Bristol Pond being such a state of Vermont watershed area and the limits on utilities going out there already, I didn't feel that EV chargers are needed there. That's my presentation in brief. The reason I'm presenting this to you is I want your feedback on this proposal. While it is going to the select board for their approval, I want the planning commission's feedback on if there's anything that you think I'm missing, anything that you think should be included. And I want to reiterate that this is an interim bylaw that is not meant to skip the PC, but allow Bristol to catch up to modernizing technology that is moving faster than municipal governments can sometimes keep up with. And putting this interim bylaw will allow for EVs to come into Bristol in a way that is keeping up with modern times, and then also allows the planning commission to kind of see what works, what doesn't work, and then can revise that on a later date once. Yeah.
Any questions or comments for AZ?
John. Jenks.
Is your assumption here that these are chargers for personal use, like at my home or somebody else's, or, like a charger for a particular person, or are these commercial ventures where essentially a filling station?
Both.
Both. So if they're permitted in all districts, I mean, would the town not have an interest in let's say somebody wanted to come in and put 10 commercial, a charging filling station that looks essentially like a gas station, is lit like a gas station all night or for part of the night or whatever it's going to be, has traffic implications, design implications, all kinds of implications on that scale, very different than my personal charger at home. So I'm a little bit wary about not accounting for that, because what do we do if somebody comes and proposes that? How do we handle it? Is that an electric vehicle charger? And so it's just permitted and that's it?
That would, if someone was coming in with something like that, that would probably be a level 3 charging facility where they're looking to put multiple charging points. And that would fall under that criteria of it needs to have a parking spot, it needs to follow the signs. In an earlier kind of proposal I was working through was the idea of separating level 2 and level 3 and having level 3 chargers automatically be site plan review in all districts, and then level 2 be more of the permitted. But I put them together as well, just
Yeah,
so
I mean, how would the development review board handle a petroleum service station that wanted to site itself?
Just to site itself?
Wanted to locate in town, build a new gas station.
Well, I mean, a gas station deals with flammable materials and has different regulations.
But besides the fuel of electricity versus gas, they're very similar, aren't they? Aren't they? They could have a convenience store attached. They could be lit all night. They might have a bank of 10 Tesla chargers or whatever. Could be a very different thing than my home charger or the bank's one charger.
Yeah.
Or the public charger on the green or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Very, very different use. So I'm wondering if shouldn't be some accounting made for use. Is it personal use? I mean, I can have a level 3 charger at home if I wanted to. That's not likely, but much more likely is a level 3 charger that is a bank of 10. Most people don't do that. So I'm concerned right off the bat that we're creating a huge loophole for, somebody wants to put in a bank of 10 Tesla chargers and we have no say. That should be a conditional use, I think. Just like a gasoline service station would be. And why wouldn't it be?
So, yeah, good point, John. Anybody else got any comments?
And I would hope that the select board doesn't pass anything before they consider that question.
I have not brought this to the select board yet.
Oh, good. Okay.
I have not. I'm bringing it to you first because I want your feedback. I have not. Jessica's actually the first select board member other than Ian to hear about this because I wanted your feedback on what do you think I'm missing here. All good. This is a big thing, so I don't.
I mean, I think there needs to be a distinction. If it's a service station, a filling station, like that's a major potential impact on a neighborhood wherever it goes, and not just the downtown. It could out at the Four Corners where we don't allow filling stations.
Yeah, I hear you. I really appreciate that, and I'll add it into my.
Rob, did you have your hand up?
I did. Yeah. So my first question was going to be why? Why are we proposing a new bylaw out of the blue? Has this been a problem to some effect, or is there something on the horizon that we're concerned with apart from just life changes?
So the first thing that brought up EVs to my mind was the Firehouse application where they wanted to put a single charger onto their parking lot. And the regulations don't have anything on EVs. They're not a power transformation. So that doesn't fall into the exemptions. They're not quite a full structure. So they're not really an accessory structure. The EV structures and charging facilities don't fall into the regulations. And under our regulations, if it's not permitted or approved, it's prohibited. So, and that's kind of the Firehouse EVs brought this up, and then the Bristol conservation, not conservation, Bristol Energy, received this grant and they reached out to me and said, do you see any issues? And I said, yes, you can't do a level 3 charging system in Bristol under the current regulations.
But it's not just because it's a level 3 charging system, it's because it's a standalone structure of sorts that's not classified in any way, right? Not just because of what level it is. If it was a built-in level 2, it'd be the same classification, I believe, not just because it's level 3.
Yeah, because
So,
it's
okay, I can understand that. My concern is the same as John's in that if it's a personal charging structure, that's one animal. But if somebody's going to say, we're going to drop a plant of 30 of them here down, you know, wherever they can find space, because there's no structure, you know, no building, no residential unit, and we're looking at trying to increase residential units and density and everything else. I don't think we want to have a farm of chargers somewhere just because it was overlooked and it said permitted everywhere.
Yeah.
I think that commercial is a lot different than personal use in that aspect.
So that brings me to my question.
Shannon, go ahead.
So my question, again, I'm with Rob and John, and I don't want to see a big bank of these. I guess this is probably more of a select board question, but they've got this GMP grant. Are they planning on putting them on town property and being owned by the town? And then, okay, we've done that. We put in 1 or we put in 2. Who's responsible for the maintenance? Because I've seen these things go up and then there's nobody to maintain them. So you end up with an eyesore, something that's sitting there that doesn't work. And I see a lot of complaints about this. So I want to make sure when they do this, it's one thing if you're putting it up for your own use, but if the town's putting it up, who's in charge of making sure it works all the time? And how much does it cost? And
great question.
And not just the install, the cost of the install plus the maintenance, because you got to make enough money to maintain it.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about the grant if anyone has questions about that, but
my other concern is building off of Shannon's statement is parking in town. If these are put on existing parking places, as somebody that lives outside the village and has to drive in and park somewhere in the village for anything that goes on in the village, very aware of restricted limits of parking within that area.
And just to clarify my position, I would like to see a bank of these in town, a service station as such, some commercial endeavor. Somebody thinks it's a good business to fill up electric cars. Great, fuel them up, give them a convenience or whatever. But that's something that we regulate now with those kinds of services. So we should keep an eye on that. They don't get a pass just because it's electric.
So, anybody else? Can you go back to your last slide?
Yeah. The use matrix.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's permitted everywhere but village business, which is downtown?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Which is
conservation? Yeah, so I think that John hit it right on the head and everybody's echoing at that. To put in what is it? The Green Mountain Power Grant is for like 1 or 2.
It's gonna be, I believe, 2 level 3 chargers. They have a location.
Is that the one that's over by the Sprout House, or what used to be the Sprout House? Some Mountain Street extension or Mountain?
Yeah, it's
View
gonna,
or whatever.
yeah, it's gonna be Tom Wells's commercial building. It's gonna be in that parking lot. Norwich EV is working with Tom Wells, who is also working with the town. It's a 3-way collaboration.
Right, so that seems innocuous enough, but John's point is the strategy for these things are to and we're not next to the interstate, so it probably won't hit Bristol for a long time if it does. But the strategy is you put them next to services, you know, Walmart, you know, a big gas station's got a few tucked in behind, and so I think there needs to be, I agree, there needs to be some sort of process to define a review process for installations that resemble a gas station, whether they follow the similar regulations, if you will, or what. I also think the onesie or the twosie that is at hand is pretty innocuous. So I mean, that would be a different level of review as opposed to if you're going to build a facility like a gas station today, but it's the charging, you know, it's the gas station of tomorrow. And thinking about that, I'm not sure we want them permitted. Do we want them permitted? I mean, the group can talk about that, but I'm not sure exactly where we want them permitted or not. Personally, I don't think we should allow them in conservation because I don't think the demand's there. And I think it's, it just doesn't make sense for that. I think, as far as your categorizations are concerned, level 1 is 110. You just plug it in the outlet anywhere you go. So those are pretty innocuous. I would differentiate level 2s between private use and public use or commercial use. Because typically if you get an electric car and Green Mountain Power gives you a charger, they're going to be level 2. So we need to be careful with level 2 chargers and not encumber the person that wants to stick one on their house or in their garage, that type of thing. Level 3s are clearly not going to be residential.
Yeah.
And that's where, and because, you know, I don't know if it was John or you talked about the Tesla stand.
We both did.
So, I mean, that is the end. I mean, there is somewhere a big bank of transformers and stuff behind a chain link fence that provides the power to get to that final little connector there. And so there's a significant footprint for that stuff as well. So onesie twosies, yeah, it's probably not a big deal looking at what this grant seems to be rolling down, but you know, John has a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
John.
Yeah, just following on your comment there, Kevin, about sort of what are the distinctions? I mean, clearly, like when I think about it, it's whether it's one distinction is personal use, like my home charger, versus a commercial use where somebody's essentially selling gas or selling electricity rather. But then there's a further distinction, which is thinking of the firehouse apartments. You know, there might be a multifamily situation like the firehouse apartments, or even just a duplex rental or something where there is a few of these things for the residents' use. And a distinction, not just one-off for me personally, but a community, but more like for a group of people to use or to have that at their, you know, apartment house. But that's also different from, you know, they're not attracting customers there. It's just for residents. So somehow there seems to be a distinction we ought to recognize somehow too. Because if, like, you know, an apartment house or a quadruplex or one person wants to do one, I don't think many people are going to have any issue with it as long as it doesn't stick out into the street or whatever. So there's that. But it is this thing. I just worry, you know, like for the bigger banks. And I think it's an interesting issue Shannon brings up about, like, for publicly owned ones, say the town has one on the green or something. I'd be very interested in who keeps it up, because I've seen them sort of unkempt too.
Yeah. I really appreciate all your feedback. This is why I wanted to come to the planning commission first. I've been working on this with Ian kind of in the background, he's the one who brought up the GMP grant to me, and I've been working on trying to find a way that doesn't just shoehorn EVs into the regulations and kind of throw a wrench into what's already there, but also helps Bristol stay up to date with what's happening in the state of just technology advancing. I thought of this as very similar to solar and wind, of like an advancing technology that does require some review and processes for, but the regulations that we currently have don't have those review and processes.
I think that it could be interpreted that currently it would be under service station.
Service station.
Yeah, because it is retail sale of automobile fuels is how it's stated in our regulations. It doesn't specify petroleum based or any other based. It's just fuels, and electricity is a fuel, right?
Yeah.
So even going under that, I think kind of like we've all echoed, is more careful consideration for placement of that stuff. But there is definitely the considerations for uses as well. And I mean, this does go with the enhanced energy plan that we put into the last town plan revision, both with the electricity pathways and the transportation pathways, with encouraging and planning for such infrastructure. But I think we do need to try to define it to be able to plan for it and be aware of potential implications.
And I very much agree. I
So,
very much agree.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that it's needed. I think, I'm not sure how big a gap it is. We're kind of stumbling through this right now, but so I guess, does anybody else have any other thoughts? I guess the thing is to just make some sort of what the next steps are.
Yeah,
And
is the grant already, will this have any implication on the GMP grant or anything else that's currently in the works?
The grant, they were awarded the money, but nothing is going to be happening on the grant for another year. This was it was sparked by the grant of just like making sure that Bristol doesn't lose out on this opportunity because the zoning doesn't quite cover it.
So the project is not approved at a town level yet to be constructed?
No. I also haven't received anything from the EV company, any plans or anything like that. But when it was brought to me, my zoning red flags went off of like, this doesn't work with regulation, and sparked this whole kind of idea and proposal going forward.
so I think the next steps is, and we can embellish on this a little bit as I lay it out, but is to address the steps that, John identified, and there seems to be consensus that we need to have some different steps in there, being private use, semi-private use, maybe, I don't know what you want to call it. I call it the onesie twosies, and then a service station style complex.
I keep wondering, is the distinction that it's available for public use or is just available for private use? That would, private use would encompass my personal charger at home, but it might also encompass the 3 chargers at the apartment complex. I don't know.
So in my mind, when you have 3 chargers at an apartment complex, that would lean to me more public than it is private. I mean, from a code point of view, those are public buildings. They're treated as public buildings from a code point of view. So I'm not sure.
That's like the semi-private. that you're kind of
Yeah, so.
I think the question would be, is the charging available for pay? Like, can anybody, any Joe drive up there, plug in and charge any time of the day or night? So, or is it just for residents? Is it in that sense a private use? Just like when I have a charger at my house, I'm not selling electricity. I don't have customers coming by all hours of the day and night.
I probably shouldn't say this very loud, but you can drive up to my charger and plug your car in.
No. Are you advertising? No. Are you advertising?
Strike this from.
It's a new business
from the minutes, but
it's a new business.
It's easy, and then you get into the semantics of, I would go with the descriptions. I mean, you were the one that came up with them, John, and I thought they were good about, how we just laid that out and not get into, well, it's not for charge and charge. Maybe we do, I don't know. But I mean, those are the types of things that, we're asking AZ to go and.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if there's like one distinction that covers it all, I don't know if there is.
Yeah, I've sold electricity from ours. I mean, am I a retailer?
Be right over.
I mean, definitely, like, I'm really glad you guys gave me this feedback. I want to deliberate this, take your feedback into account, work up a new proposal, bring it back to y'all before it goes to the select board.
So in February?
February is kind of booked.
Okay.
Well,
it's whenever you see it fit.
Yeah, I can shoot for February.
Well, no, if your schedule is, if you think we're gonna have a full February, then, well, no, that's a detail, we can.
I will get back to you on that. But yeah, the next steps, I'll take I'm taking your feedback. I've taken a lot of notes on what has been said. What are your concerns? Work that into an updated proposal, bring that back to y'all. As I said, this is the select board's decision, but I want the planning commission to be a big part of this as well.
What is our timeline for public vote on UDR updates currently without this?
What is the timeline for public vote?
Yeah, with all of the bylaw modernization updates that we just did and everything else, were we on August track or?
Oh, so that question went before the voters in November and was approved.
Sorry, okay.
And then,
okay.
There was a waiting period that, I believe there was a waiting period before it became in effect, which would have been like 30 days or something, so.
Yeah.
I think it's in effect, right?
It's in effect. I've been working on the UDR finalization, trying to get Addison County Regional Planning Commission to provide me the finalized maps, but that UDR update was approved by voters on November 5th. Went through that waiting period, and now it is in effect. It just has to get the maps updated so they no longer say proposed.
Okay, because the UDR that's currently still on the website is just 2020.
Yep.
Vision, so that's why I got a little confused. So sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's something I'm working on in the back end of all the changes that were voted upon have been made to the document. It's just getting Addison County to do that one final look through of just cool, you're good to go. I've done my look through. I've reached out to the GIS person in Addison County to try to get the maps to no longer say proposed and just say zoning district. But I haven't been getting a lot of feedback from them. But that's wrapping up as well.
Okay, so this would be the only outstanding item if we have a year, it'd be next town meeting or that we'd be on to have to vote on it, right?
Yeah.
Or was it Was it 1 year or 2 years?
So interim, I think is 2 years.
2 years.
It's 2? Okay.
Yeah.
I think so.
And but that's it's a 2-year window of after that 2 years it kind of ends. So the planning commission has the ability to change it in those 2 years or amend it or take it out or yeah,
Okay, so
it is a 2-year.
we kind of laid out some things about size. Is there anything else that we specifically want AZ to address? Okay. We'll move on to the next item, which is administrative matters. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve. So we should probably start with the November 19th minutes.
I was not here for that meeting, so I didn't see anything that looked out of order. But
Anybody have any comments or questions about the November 19th minutes?
No.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve. John makes a motion, somebody second.
I'll second.
Okay, Shannon seconds. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Is anybody opposed? Any abstentions? They carry. The next set is January 9th, which was a special remote Zoom meeting with the Middlebury College students.
I'd move that we adopt these.
Okay, John makes a motion to adopt. Anybody make a second?
Second.
Shannon makes a second. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? It carries. So the next thing is AZZA report.
Busy holiday season, a lot of annual reports to finish up. I do have exciting news. Y'all will be getting paid for all your time that you put into these meetings. I put that together today, so hopefully within the next week, you'll receive payment for all the meetings that you've attended and all the work you've put in for this commission, which is greatly appreciated. Outside of that, I've been working with Frida on an application for the 2025 municipal planning grant. I have some really big ideas that I want to do with that, mostly getting some either doing a townwide survey is one of the bigger ones of trying to get the most amount of public participation we can and asking questions on how people feel about development, what they're hoping to see, what they're hoping to see less of, but hoping to finish up that application and get it submitted by the deadline in March, and using a lot of that money to get some up-to-date public feedback on how things are going in Bristol. Another idea is to get online GIS maps for the town so that parcel data, zoning permits, all that can be found on an online GIS service. And then I made 2 proposals to the select board on January 13th. One was to change the zoning fee schedule slightly, mostly a streamlining, kind of evening out some permit fees. I moved accessory dwelling units to the residential fee schedule, as that made sense to me. As they are residential units, they should be charged as such, even though they are accessory. And then adding in a minor DRB and other minor review fee of $75, which coincides with the $150 for major development review that requires posting in the newspaper. There are some review cases that don't require posting in the newspaper. And I proposed a fee for that. That was approved by the select board. And then I also proposed that the applications for work in the right of way and access permits come to the zoning office first. Not that I'm in charge of approving them, simply that they come to my office first for administrative matters of assigning a permit number, ensuring that they have all the requirements, and then sending them off to either Public Works or the select board or both. And this was to simplify the permit process for applicants, for the office, for everyone involved. And the select board approved of that as well. And just I've been asking the department heads to start thinking about the town plan update, even though it feels like it's far away. Have a feeling 3 years is gonna go by in a flash. And just started asking them to start pondering town plan. And then it's been a pretty slow winter, not a lot of permits. There's 3 cases on the DRB docket, a PUD, a 2-lot subdivision, and a 4-lot subdivision. And yeah, that sums it up. If there's any other questions. Exciting stuff.
Not hearing any questions, so. Next item is miscellaneous correspondence. Do we have anything for that?
Not really. I've been in contact with Carolyn Dash, but
Okay,
that was just to confirm next month's meeting.
okay. So we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any public with us still? No? Okay. So the next thing is I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Rob. Does anybody second that? John seconds. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Now raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Good. Thank you very much. We had an excellent meeting. We had some really good reports from the Middlebury College students. I'm looking forward to seeing their final reports, and we had a lively discussion on EV chargers. So
Yeah.
thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Good night.